Hi there, good morning everybody, and welcome to the second of iApps on-demand webinars. Last month we had a fantastic session with our very own Natalie speaking with Paul Garrity of SAP on best practice in how to empower a more productive team via mobility. This month promises to be an absolutely excellent session. We're really happy to be joined by Bryn Grainger of Macquarie Telecom and Gillies of MobileIron. We're going to be talking about mobility in business, mobile device management and beyond. We're going to be discussing how the telcos are embracing mobility, bring your own device, and discussing a little bit more about mobility first organisations. But first things first, I'd like to welcome Bryn Grainger from Macquarie. Bryn, if you could say a few words about yourself, that would be fantastic.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Yeah, I'm part of the mobility line of business at Macquarie Telecom, and our department is responsible for the product and partnership development and the sales and commercial and technical support for new and existing clients across Australia. And over the last 8 or 9 years, I've had various roles at Optus and Telstra, and it's been talking to businesses about how and why they use mobility and so forth. So at Macquarie, we've been serving the mid-market of corporate Australia for over 22 years. And we're known for our data centers and our hosting capability, and maybe being a traditional telecommunications provider. But we're finding more and more that we're working with organizations more about on their mobility strategy and ways that they can mobilize their workforce. And in this regard, we think there are a number of key elements that need to be considered to effectively deliver value this way. And obviously, you need to have well-matched plans, so you're not paying too much, and you need to have the choice of as any carrier, a good, robust, business-grade wireless carrier, or the choice of 3 like we do, and an adequate tech fund to buy devices as required. But the engagement that we're finding ourselves in, and which is kind of really fascinating and excites, certainly excites me, is that we're going deeper and wider into the organization and talking about like mobility strategy and ways that they can improve, for example, productivity. That's replacing these manual workflows with specific mobile applications and using mobile to increase the level of engagement across the organization. And that's business to business, business to customer or supplier, and certainly business to employee. And, you know, with that's people wanting documents and forms and so forth in real time. And with the pervasiveness of mobility and the connectivity we have these days, obviously they want it, you know, anywhere and any time they are. And it's also about improving the way that an organization perhaps differentiates itself, you know, through the devices, the features that are on handsets, like location-based services, or creating new ways of going to market, which will give them a competitive advantage. And we do all of this, of course, in conjunction with our partners at MobileIron and iApps Australia.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Bryn. That was a really helpful insight. Stephen, you're up next. This is Stephen Gillies from MobileIron.
Thanks very much, Claire. So my role is technical sales engineer responsible for Australia and New Zealand. MobileIron's been around for a few years. We have a platform for mobile IT. And when I say mobile IT, I mean the content on devices from mobility operating systems. So we're talking about iOS, we're talking about Android, it's tablets, it's smartphones. We've got about 4,000 customers worldwide. Several hundred of them are here in Australia and in New Zealand. Both corporate, all the way down to small business, and then all the way up again to government, for example. Highly secure environments are a good example of some of the things we've been doing recently. We have an on-premise deployment, we have a hybrid deployment, and we also have a cloud environment which is hosted here in Australia.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stephen. Okay, well, we've got a lot of subject matter to tackle, so I'm now going to hand over to Natalie to begin the discussion. Thanks, Nat.
Thank you, Claire, and Stephen and Bryn. I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. Really looking to the both of you today for some thought leadership in mobility and really get your viewpoints on where mobility is heading and the importance of it in an organisation. Bryn, I'm going to start with you working for Macquarie Telecom, being a service provider here in country. Now, if I look back 5 years ago at mobile, it was all about going and buying a mobile phone, going to my telecom provider, getting a voice plan, perhaps getting a small data plan, which I'd probably use for email. It's really progressed since then in the past 5 years, and mobile isn't all about just about a mobile phone anymore. So how has the telecommunication providers here in country, and I guess globally, how are they embracing this new world of technology?
Yeah, thanks, Nat. I mean, I think all carriers are sort of thinking along the same lines as ourselves, that it's no longer about mobiles, as you say. It's certainly about mobility and taking steps with businesses to help them make these changes in this transition. And we believe there's an enormous opportunity for mobile operators. And if they are like ourselves, they can provide the required services to the businesses all under one roof. Like, we're fortunate to have our own data centers, because these applications and the data that's derived from these applications need to be, and most likely will be, hosted in the cloud. So we feel that we're fairly well situated, and in fact, our MobileIron solution is a hosted solution, and we have a dedicated VM or server for all of our clients. Also, we realize that if a business wants to go down the mobility path alone, they could incur a large amount of upfront costs and the risks associated with the transition and maintaining of what is basically a new way of doing business. So the whole everything under one roof approach is being taken, I think, and where we can go to these businesses and provide all the components of a mobility type of solution, if you like. That's in the devices, the data, the application, and of course, the security platform. We can do all of that in a model that is a monthly cost, an operating expenditure, basically a pay-as-you-go model, as opposed to getting hit with a big lump sum right up front. So I guess the idea is to put everything under one roof, and it's including as I say, the cloud infrastructure as well. Telcos were once, as you said, setting and controlling the mobility landscape only just a few years ago. I remember, and it probably changed, if you like, with the iPhone, but we were only a few years ago sort of really happy to send an SMS or be able to take a picture with our phone. And mobile data was, as you say, Nat, was limited to sending emails. But that was all before the explosion of applications and devices and so forth. And it's interesting how it's changed. I remember in a previous life where I was working for another carrier, and plans were out there for something like 300 megabytes per month was costing $50 or $60. And I read recently that the average sort of per capita use per month is already at 700 megabytes. It goes to show you how much has changed. So we realize it's not just about selling handsets and carriage, and it's about sort of partnering with the likes of MobileIron and iApps and providing assistance through the entire sort of solution. It's not a transactional sale anymore that occurs every 2 or 3 years. You have to be engaged with the customer over the long term for the changing requirements and so forth over the entire life cycle. And as I said, it's not focusing on the device, but to be more sensitive about how these businesses are using their device and what the end user experience is.
Interesting that you mentioned the end user experience, and I think when we look at the end user experience, that's where we really have seen the uptake of BYOD. So bring your own device. I think if we look at the past sort of 12 to 24 months, every organisation is actually having to start to think, or either forced into it, or really taking a proactive look into bring your own device. And it really is, as you say, about that user experience. So how has the bring your own device phenomenon actually affected the carriers here in country?
Yeah, it's certainly live and out there, Nat. And BYOD is all about employees wanting the same access and experience that they have on their devices at home as they do at work. Employees are bringing their own devices into the corporate environment, and they're very attached. they're very attached to these devices. And it's not just the devices themselves, it's how they like them set up. So from a carrier perspective, it's a lot about preserving that native experience, perhaps away from the device itself. And I think that carriers are going to have to provide a lot more flexibility and choice. Within the organization and the BYOD structure, for example, where BYOD policy is in place and the employee gets just a SIM card, choice may mean sort of providing a range of carriers. Every carrier has its own attributes, and they're not all perfect. Some cases, the carrier or the network is used could be it could be dictated by price. In other cases, you may need that remote regional coverage. Flexibility, as I mentioned, is key with BYOD environment. Carriers will be approached, I think, more and more by the end user to add and remove services and to make changes like roaming, perhaps, or adding extra data. And this isn't going to happen at the beginning. It's going to happen continually throughout the course of the agreement. So, one thing is for certain, you'll start seeing a lot more BYOD branded rate plans out there in the marketplace, which we're seeing now. And of course, like the key in the BYOD environment is control. And control has two aspects to it. It's the operational running costs, of course, of each individual service. That's the voice and data usage. I think that, we may be looking at some sort of cap or provide sufficient data allowance across the fleet to sort of take away that worry that people have of getting a nasty bill shock on data, which occurs on a fairly regular basis. Part of that answer as well, because it does happen quite frequently, is to be able to in real time monitor what people are using and perhaps be a bit more predictive than reactive. And the other component, of course, is control over the applications and the devices and the content in the corporate environment. And we understand this, and that's the reason we're so pleased about our partnership with MobileIron.
Thank you, Bryn. You mentioned control, and I guess this really leads in very and I know I was involved with MobileIron when they first came into Australia about 24 months ago. And back then, it was the control about certain things about the device, like not allowing the device that's jailbroken onto my corporate network. Things like, where is my device? Ensuring there is a password on my device. So, Stephen, can you, I guess, take us through, what has actually changed in the past sort of 12 to 24, even 6 months with MobileIron, and where they're actually really coming from now?
Exciting. So you're absolutely right. 6 or 12 months ago, it was all about find my phone, wipe my phone. But these days, it's more about the applications, it's about the content, and it's about the native user experience. We've got a great number of application developers here in Australia and also in New Zealand who are building applications for local business as well, and that's pretty important. But when I talk to CIOs and CTOs about what they want out of their mobility environment, they talk about building applications for their own employee base. They talk about providing access to content, whether it's SharePoint or the intranet, and they talk about how to do certificate-based authentication so we can do away with some of these passwords, for example, and just making it easy for users to access corporate information. You've got to remember that we really are moving from an environment which the user, the employee gets up in the morning and goes to work. In many cases, the employee gets up in the morning, picks up their iPad, and even while they're on the bus, they're accessing their corporate information or sending emails or reading the morning news, that kind of thing. In fact, I saw an interesting stat recently. Fairfax did a review of people who access Fairfax media, and something like 60% of them are accessing that media from tablets. So we're certainly moving to a more of a mobile, borderless environment with not only our consumer personal lives, but also with our working lives.
So to me, that really highlights the mobile device management isn't all about the device anymore. So mobile device management and beyond really is about the content and applications. So can you explain to me and to those on the call today, how do MobileIron help manage and secure the content and applications that are residing on that device?
So we've got a number of ways that we do that. We pioneered this concept of the business app store. And so the organisation can choose applications which are relevant and specific to their organisation. And they can make recommendations to individuals or even use whitelisting and blacklisting to make sure those applications are installed on the device. I've already mentioned applications that are built in-house and distributed to that device as well. It's really important, though, that we remember that the native user experience is really important for usability. I also saw that there's a couple of analyst firms saying that in Q1 2003, the top 4 app stores worldwide accounted for about 13.4 billion downloads. Now, that's obviously not just business, but the app environment is really key to these devices. There is a real business in that. It's about $2.2 billion, I think, in in-app purchases and worldwide sales of applications. But if we come back to some of the MobileIron App Connect partners, for example, these are application developers who build applications specific to business, the Xellions and the Mobile Echoes, and there are a whole range of them that deliver content to devices. It's so that employees can access their corporate information easily and quickly from their chosen device, a tablet or smartphone.
Mm. And it's no longer just about securing the device, it's really about that whole content and applications. And what we're seeing is that within organisations is that once they have the devices secured and under management through something like MobileIron, they really want to take things to the next level and start using these devices as a true business tool. So, Stephen, you've talked about how things have progressed very much so in the past 6 months even. Are you able to share with us the roadmap for MobileIron, say in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, look, it's going to be more about content and more about applications. I would suspect that we'll very soon be seeing a lot more integration with the corporate infrastructure for mobile devices. And part of that integration is around having a mobile strategy in place and being able to implement things like acceptable use policies and to introduce in place to start an organisation's journey into mobile IT. But we're going to be seeing these devices used all over the place. Connectivity is a lot easier these days. We've got 3G, 4G networks. We've got Wi-Fi pretty much everywhere. And the NBN is going to further enable employees and businesses to offer video content and other things to these devices and communicate with their employees more effectively as well. We're going to see that integration into the enterprise a key part of mobility use within organisations.
I really appreciate that information, Stephen, and you being able to share with us the roadmap for MobileIron in particular. One of the next topics I'd like to talk to both you and Bryn about is a subject that's been coming up quite a lot lately, and it's this term of mobile-first organisations. So, Bryn, if I can ask you first, what is a mobile-first organisation, and what do they do?
Yeah, you're right. I'll take a step back because I think largely, Natalie, it's sort of derived, if you like, from the greater processing capacity and capability we've got on our mobile devices that's enabled this to happen. So in these sort of organizations, or with mobility, if you like, you're able to do pretty much anything that you can do on your PC, of course, on your mobile device, but much more than that, of course, because you're able to do it anywhere with the ubiquity of mobile connectivity. So I think in a short answer, the mobility first businesses or organizations, they design their they design their business processes around the way people work, which is quite a fundamental difference than where we're at perhaps today. Stephen can speak more, I'm sure, about what a mobile first business is, but effectively it's inevitable that the businesses will move to this sort of environment where mobile is the primary platform. And everyone thinks and operates in terms of mobility first. That's, for example, like the first place apps are developed are for the mobile device. And perhaps the first way that these organizations are interacting with their customers and their suppliers and so forth will be on the mobile device.
Absolutely. Stephen, would you like to elaborate?
I'm seeing lots of organisations when looking at new ways of changing a workflow, whether that's accessing the CRM or putting in a sales order or even accessing corporate information, price lists and that kind of thing. The first place that those CTOs and CIOs look is to mobile. Because, of course, remember that most of these organisations, the users already have some kind of tablet. It could be an iPad, it could be a Samsung device, it could be the new Sony device. And so it makes sense to deliver applications to a device which is already in the network. You know, there's less of a cost associated with hardware. But also remember that this app environment allows you to deploy just single-use applications. You remember in the old days, you know, you'd log onto your PC and then you'd open your Office document and you'd find the right document that you're working on, and perhaps you'd that was somehow linked into a database or something like that. It was, you know, it's quite complex to get that kind of workflow up and running, and there's a lot of documentation in enterprises that describe all of those steps. And these days, you open up your iPad, you click on an icon, and you're there immediately. And that benefit is something that certainly most enterprises that I talk to is very attractive to them.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, what's really driven this is when we've seen this whole consumerisation into the enterprise. So we all have our personal tablets, we all have our personal smartphones, and so the way we interact in our personal life, we now actually want to interact in that in our business life as well. So I think that mobility first or mobile first organisation really is changing the way we actually do business and the way we traditionally have done things. Stephen, you mentioned a little while ago about mobility strategy and the importance of one. So perhaps, Bryn, if I can sort of throw to you first and ask you, you know, why do organisations, whether they be small, medium or in the enterprise, why do they need a mobility strategy and what does this entail?
Yeah, no, great. I mean, absolutely, this is required, and really, it's not like in the past. It's about sitting down with your, you know, your telco rep every 2 or 3 years and discussing rate plans and the latest features of an iPhone. It's far more reaching, and it must go across, you know, all departments within the organization. And it's not just done as a one-off every, you know, 1 or 2 years or 2 or 3 years. It's constantly refreshed. It's constantly changed. So the level of engagement has to be there all the way through. I've met a lot of businesses that kind of approach their mobile mobility strategy, if you like, on this ad hoc basis, and yet we'll get into a discussion about sort of how they have real sort of security concerns with what's out there. So, so for a start, you know, a strategic plan should be implemented to ensure that with all this connectivity, there's no cost blowouts, and data from mobile data, of course, and also infrequently or unused devices. You know, why should you be paying sort of monthly service charges if they're not being used? Also to consider maybe is the, you know, the time, and I mentioned this before, is how you are sort of predicting behavior of your users in a BYOD environment, for example, rather than reacting and shaping the plans and so forth accordingly. And there's, very importantly, of course, the key considerations of integrating all of these devices with all of their content into the enterprise information systems. So with BYOD, it's vital to have a clear strategy on how services are going to be subsidized. And that's dealing with the likes of, you know, myself and working out the best plans and the most flexible plans. And how do you negotiate internally, though, these corporate rates versus like an employee that's gone out and perhaps got their own service? So there's certainly a lot to be considered.
Absolutely. Stephen, what's been your experience with, you know, the client base that you work with and the need for a mobile strategy within those clients?
But we really see it as critical to have some kind of strategy, and it doesn't need to be a 60-page document. In some cases, organisations already have a number of those the strategies in place. So an acceptable use policy, for example, probably applies to desktop environments, and it's quite straightforward to expand that acceptable use policy to include some things, of course, that are specific to a mobile strategy within an organisation. And some of those things include what applications are going to be delivered, what becomes the standard operating environment for a tablet. How to secure those applications obviously needs to be part of that, and choosing number of digits for a passcode and all of those kind of things are really important. But there are some things outside the technology that need to be thought about as well. So we mentioned roaming costs before. If a user travels overseas and is using their tablet, how do we make sure that the cost doesn't blow out? And making sure that you have a good relationship with your telco is definitely part of that. Macquarie Telecom are good at that. But also, if it's a BYOD device, for example, if the user misplaces or loses the device, who pays for it? What is the replacement process for a device which is a bring your own? Backup strategies, whether you allow things like iCloud, how does that device connect to the internet, who pays for the data, all of those things are things that organisations need to have a good think about, even device choice. So is it all iPad? Is it all Android? Is it just smartphones and iPhones? What's the strategy for the hardware?
Absolutely.
Of course, MobileIron has a great platform for enabling all of these devices, but you really do need a partner. And that's where, in my experience, iApps are pretty good at that. And I'd throw back to you, Natalie, to talk about that. But we're an enablement platform, and are happy to work with organisations to make sure that the strategy is implemented correctly.
Absolutely, and I think when we talk about mobility, I think that the first thing that organisations need to look at is a mobile strategy. I wrote a blog the other week, and what I said in that was that someone somewhere in your business is doing something in mobility. It's naive to think that they're not doing it. So when we talk about a mobility strategy, and we run a lot of mobility strategy workshops here at iApps, it's not just about engaging a carrier. It's not just about deploying a mobile device management tool like MobileIron. It's not just about having BYOD policy. It's not just IT involved. It's not just marketing or sales or finance. It really is the whole business that needs to come together to really sit down and work out this mobile strategy. Mobile first organisations we've spoken about, and how it really is progressing in this marketplace. So to be one of the leaders, or to even just keep up in this space, a strategy is really important to have that. So one of the final questions I really want to throw to the both of you was really just ask about your opinion of mobility. And, we've spoken about, just 12, 24 months and how things have progressed and changed. And that's not going to be changing itself. Things are going to be continually to change and progress. So in your opinion, Stephen, if you can, I guess, share with us, what is your opinion of where mobility is heading and what can we look forward to?
It's an exciting space, and connectivity is certainly part of that. Our wonderful 3G and 4G networks, the NBN is coming to provide a whole lot more bandwidth. And with that, I think we'll see application developers build more and more interesting applications for us to use both in consumer land, but primarily in business as well. I see that a whole lot of organisations, like educational organisations, for example, are deploying or having students purchase tablets. And there are a whole lot of reasons for that. Just that they're lighter and easier to carry around is actually a pretty big. But if you ask most users of iPads today, they would say that they use their iPad for content consumption. So they watch the news, they watch video, they might access YouTube, they might access their documents for their business purposes, and they certainly do email and maybe VPN, Wi-Fi connectivity, and all of that kind of thing, and that's great. But content creation, I think, is the big thing that's coming very soon. So we're going to see the ability to not only consume but also to create using these devices. One of the most exciting. You've got a camera associated with the device as well. So, we talk about a multimedia content creation experience, and I'm pretty excited to see that develop. There are already applications out there that allow you to do that, and they're going to be more business focused very soon.
Thank you. Bryn, in your opinion, where's mobility heading?
Yeah, well, just to add to what Stephen was saying there, he was talking about all that content and data. Well, that has to be put somewhere, and that's really kind of interesting. It's like cloud mobility is like client server almost in the past. So the key trend with all of this data is machine to machine, which Stephen didn't mention, and the Internet of Things, which is being bandied about a lot. I was watching a blog recently, and it was the CTO of Telstra making predictions about how every device in the home, in the car, and the refrigerator, and so forth will be talking to each other. Not only talking, but learning from each other. And this sort of will be enabled through the capabilities and sensors that are on devices like near NFC, for example, or image recognition services. And I think he said that by 2030, there would be something like 1 trillion connections occurring between machine and man. I mean, that is a hell of a lot of SIM cards that are going to be out there in the marketplace. And I think in the same article, it was talking about a 6-fold increase in mobile data traffic by 2017. So it's certainly going to be going there in that direction. And maybe just one other point, and is that closer to home perhaps, is that mobile devices can be used through cellular networks, of course, and also Wi-Fi and fixed networks. And I think the growth in devices that's occurring right now is going to have a massive effect on the NBN and its final capabilities. So that'll be an interesting space to watch.
Absolutely. Bryn, Stephen, thank you very much for your thoughts today, and I think it really highlights that we are going further and further down this mobility path. A lot of organisations, one of the first things they did was introduce a BYOD policy. Next thing was part of that BYOD policy was really to get a MobileIron or some sort of management device tool in place. And now we're starting to see where we're now progressing of using these devices truly as a business tool, and that's really where the content and applications comes into play. It's important to remember what a mobile-first organisation is and to strive to become a mobile-first organisation. And this really shows the importance of having a mobile strategy in play. So, Claire, I'm going to head back to you now over in the studio. Do we have any questions?
We do. I've just had my first one come through, and this is from Lou, and it's to, I guess, any of the panel. Thank you very much for your time and your insight. That was a great session. So the first question is that obviously it's been mentioned that the PC is becoming more and more obsolete, as it were. How will us digital natives cope with the increasing mobilisation of our workforces, or us non-digital natives, I should say?
So look, I think I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Because it really goes back to the use of those devices. We're seeing this consumerization of IT, where devices which are designed who are not necessarily technical to be able to use a touch interface to more easily navigate the environment. We're seeing apps of these tablets available from the iTunes store or from Google Play. I think there are about 1 million or close to 1 million apps on each of those stores. So there's certainly a lot of choice.
Yeah.
Anything from games to web browsers and all sorts of things. But I think we're seeing the interfaces getting easier. User experience and that native experience is becoming easier to use. And so I don't see people being left behind as these devices seemingly get more and more complex. In fact, I think they're getting much easier because of the touch environment.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you very much, Stephen. Our second question has come from James, again to the entire panel. What are the key benefits you've seen since partnering with each other? So I guess either Bryn or Stephen, feel free to take this one.
Yeah, I think I can. I'll start with the answer on that one. One of the things, the way that there's a number of reasons for that, but and obviously the key is the prominence of MobileIron across the world, and its position in the Gartner quadrants and so forth. That's all taken into account. But in Australia, they've the way they go to market here is basically through distributors, and we have found them very engaging and very easy to deal with, but also the actual componentry and implementation. And in our experience, when we've talked to other businesses that have wanted to install a mobility solution, things have fallen down with the actual implementation and getting this going. And the level of support that we've got through MobileIron and its distributors in Australia, we've been able to completely address that in terms of the actual provisioning and implementation and training and ongoing support. So amongst all of the other things that Stephen has said, I think just to get the MobileIron platform in play, from what we've seen, is quite a difficult feat. And with MobileIron and as I say, the distributors, we've been able to address that.
Excellent.
I'd say, Bryn, I agree that with a mobile strategy, implementing all of those things is certainly something that needs a good level of thought. Integration with any enterprise infrastructure needs a fair bit of thought as well. And remember, we're talking about security of corporate information, data leakage protection. There are a whole lot of other components to implementation of MDM and the use of tablets in organisations. I would say that MobileIron gets a great deal out of the engagement with Macquarie Telecom. It gets us in front of some organisations who really, they've got their thinking hats on when it comes to what's happening in the future, and they can see that organisation and telco like Macquarie Telecom is flexible and able to meet their requirements quickly. So we're very happy to be partnered.
Excellent, thank you very much. So viewers at home or at work, we've got a few more minutes to send any of your questions to the panel. The next one that I've got coming through is from Leia, and it's regarding BYOD. Is it a passing phase? Is it here to stay? How can we kind of foresee its continuity, I guess, or how do you foresee its continuity?
I'll take that minute.
Oh, yeah. Go, Stephen.
Thank you.
I thought you might want this one, Stephen.
Yeah. It's my answer might be a little bit different to what you're expecting. Passing fad. Look, the devices, they're already in your network. In fact, even organisations who don't have a BYOD strategy and are trying to deploy just corporate-owned devices, you're still going to find that there are bring-your-own devices in your network. And they may even be connecting to your network today. You just don't know about it. So BYOD is not only here to stay, it's going to be the norm. There will always be a mix of corporate-owned devices and devices that are owned by the individual. There are lots of benefits to both strategies, but I don't think you can have one or the other. I would say every one of the viewers here would know somebody who has two phones, a work phone and a personal phone. And what our go-to-market is all about is minimising the complexity of having multiple devices and providing the employees and also the organisation with the choice of deploying a particular type of device. I often replace the bring your own device with the choose your own device. So here are 5 or 6 devices which are with the environment, and the employees get to choose one of those and bring one of those devices. So BYOD, here to stay, is going to be normal, and a really simple one is a good thing to have.
Great stuff.
If I can just elaborate on that, and I think Stephen's 100% right that BYOD is absolutely here to stay, and it is all about choice. There was an article that was written that I know Stephen's also read a couple of days ago that was called Bring Your Own Disaster instead of Bring Your Own Device. And I think where that was coming from is that if you don't have a strategy or you don't have something like MobileIron in place to actually manage it, it is going to be Bring Your Own Disaster. So it's absolutely here to stay. The whole thing is managing the Bring Your Own Device so it doesn't actually turn into a disaster.
That's great. Thanks. Bryn, do you have anything to add on that one?
No, I think those guys have covered that one off quite well. Yeah.
That's excellent. Okay, guys, there's no more questions at the minute. Is there anything you would like to add before I begin to close?
I guess one of the things that impressed me recently, I was at the Tim Berners-Lee presentation, creator of the internet or father of the internet, and he made it very clear that his view was that the more people who are building applications and are thinking about new ways of doing things and that simplification of interfaces and that native experience that I'm talking about, the better. So if any of your viewers out there are building applications and building apps for mobile devices, please keep at it and please let us know as well. We're very keen to engage with Australian developers. We have a software development kit that allows a developer to build in MobileIron hooks to their application and become part of our app ecosystem. So if you've got a great idea, start coding.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good on you. That's good stuff. Anybody else like to add anything? Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much. That was an absolutely brilliant session. Once again, from Natalie and myself, we really, really do appreciate Bryn and Stephen's time and efforts in taking part in this session. And we hope that everybody who's been viewing and participating in questions has found it as enjoyable and as insightful as indeed Natalie and myself have. That's great.
Thanks very much, guys, for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Much
It's
appreciated.
our pleasure. It's our pleasure. If anyone would like to contact ourselves or Bryn at Macquarie or indeed Stephen at MobileIron, we are shortly going to display our holding slide which contains all of their contact details. If there's anything you want to discuss further, if there's anything you didn't get a chance to ask about today, we'll also be posting a video of the webinar once we've sorted all the content out, and that will be available via social media networks and online as well. So thank you for your time today, and we'll see you for next month's instalment.